So hello, you are sitting here with two brown ladies. I'm Tamika.
I'm Kidan.
And we are here with D Moss. Everybody knows him as a community organizer, a social justice advocate, and he is also the founder and publisher of Metro Records. Thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here. D and I go way back. He worked at MLK when I was a teen, and from there we had a really good relationship. And through the years, I see you grow. I've seen you grow. I witnessed you go from someone who worked in the community to being like a real social justice advocate. So, can you tell me when you got to Springfield and how did that all begin? What was your journey like?
All right. I'm from Connecticut. I was living in Waterbury, working at an incarceration center with adults. And it's kind of like doing that type of work is cool, it's gratifying. But I realized that by the time folks are 25, 35, 40, there's not much you can really do to change their mindset. And I decided I want to work with young people. My brother was living in Springfield at the time, so I sent a bunch of resumes on a whim to Springfield. I got hired by the Department of Youth Services and the KEY program on State Street. So I took the job with the KEY program and started getting familiar with the Springfield community, meeting a lot of folks, a lot of guys who were on the streets, and it was kind of dope. So it was one of the things I was like, okay, I like Springfield. You guys had a burgeoning black business community. People were actively involved. Folks were doing everything, doing things and really making things happen. Got a chance to meet Ray Jordan, Ben Swan, Henry Twiggs, folks like that. And it's like, wow, these folks are like civil rights icons. So they've actually done the work. So settled in. I've been here since I arrived in '94 and I haven't left.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So what drives that passion around community and trying to organize and
Pretty much keep us
have your
together, I think, in a way.
Like I said, I'm from Connecticut, small town, Meriden. We used to have Klan rallies in our town. So we were the first black family in the neighborhood that, when we moved from Waterbury, Connecticut to Meriden, we were the first black family in that whole side of town. I remember we had a big, beautiful in-ground pool, nice big house, the whole nine. Every time we go on vacation, we'd come back and the house would be like destroyed. The in-ground pool, my dad had to have removed because they cut the lining and they destroyed the piping. Actually, they just stole all the copper piping from the pool. So it just got to the point, going through their school system, growing up in that, just growing up in that city, just kind of, I don't know, it's just, you have two options. You learn to assimilate or you learn to, wage war against the status quo and you do everything you can for the good of your community. I know that black folks down in Meriden, we just had absolutely nothing on a social, cultural level. There was absolutely nothing. So I started getting involved in working with kids who were involved in the street trade between Meriden and Waterbury. Started a black expo down there. Got bored with being down there, wanted to do something different, wanted to do a different type of work, and then I came up here. So when you talk about what fuels the passion, I think a lot of it has to do with where I grew up and how we grew up. Like the odds are always against us. So watching young people, graduate from high school or leave high school to dead-end jobs and dead-end lives, and just knowing just how brilliant those folks were when you first met them. Mm-hmm. And you see how the system just kind of, kills their level of self-esteem, their sense of self-determination, even in terms of their self-identification in terms of who they are and how they see themselves. It was all based on how white people see them. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of fuels me. I mean, I love being me, I love being black, and I love my people. So when it comes down to anything dealing with the black community, I'm jumping in 125% because there's work that has to get done. And you realize that if you don't initiate the process, sometimes nobody will.
Right.
So been doing it here for almost 30 years, down in Connecticut for God knows how long. And it's just like, as long as God give me the energy to wake up, the ancestors rock with me. Do work.
Yeah, that's funny because I was like, if you want to get something done, introduce it to D. I always say that. You probably don't know that I say that.
No, I didn't know you said that.
Yeah, I do. Like, if you want to get something done, just be like, D, this is my idea. Because even I always this is commercial break, off the record. Like, whenever I have an idea, I'd be like, oh yeah, let me run this by D. All right, now back to the regular scheduled program? The next question would be.
Well, no, you talked about youth development and where that passion stemmed from. Can you talk a little bit about what type of things you're doing with the youth to help them with maintaining that strong self-worth and confidence throughout their years?
Well, it's interesting. I don't work as much directly with the youth. I think I've kind of aged out of that. I work with a number of folks who do work with you in terms of mentoring them, helping to guide them through the process, making sure they didn't make some of the same mistakes I made. And even trying to get people to understand that you can't just work with our kids without working with the family members. So now I focus most of my work with environmental policy in terms of its impact on our community at large, and not just individual kids. And I realize that programming, our kids don't need programs. We need a process that will set them in motion so that they can actualize any dream that they may have had. So back in the day when I was doing the youth stuff, it was always based on programs that were designed somewhere in Iowa, Milwaukee, and stuff like that. So we were throwing circles into square holes. So I don't really do the youth stuff anymore. I do family stuff. We do the panel sessions on a regular basis. We just talk about, we started the Association of Black Business and Professionals. It's about getting families involved and just stressing the importance of small family-owned businesses and how families that work together thrive together. So indirectly do stuff with young people, go back and forth to Boston, advocate a lot for legislation that's going to impact the programming that still exists. But on the larger part, it's really just getting information out to our families and to our community.
You have several methods of having your voice being heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Local radio, your publisher, the Metro Record, as Mika mentioned. For those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about the Metro Record? Like, what are some of the things that you feature in the Metro Record? Where can we find it?
Okay. The Metro Record.
Where did it all get started?
The newspaper?
The newspaper.
I started a newspaper back when I was about 22. My first newspaper is called the New African Contender down in Meriden, because there were no black newspapers and we had no narrative. So when I left college, I came back home and I'm like, okay, where's the black news? There were a couple of things happening. I remember getting interviewed by folks in the Meriden Record and Wallingford Journal, all the little local newspapers around some of the work we were doing down there. And they would completely twist anything and everything that we told them. So if we said, at one point we started a couple of drill teams in the area, get kids involved. They highlighted the crime that was taking place down in the Mills, which is the housing complex down in Meriden. It was all based around the crime, and the programming element that we had created had nothing to do with that. When we talked about setting up after-school programs, my mom was a pastor of the church, so we took the church house, we started after-school programs. Everything was based around crime and broken families and single-parent households. And we're like, well, that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this because, there's a huge gaping void with the school system, huge void in terms of like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, and the programs that they had. So we wanted to create programs that would, stimulate our own folks.
Right.
So it's, man, I forgot the question.
How did you start? That's right.
So that's how we started. So it's about narrative. So when we started the New African Contender, me and a partner of mine, Richard Bird, we started the New African Contender. We got into a public debate with folks from the NAACP down there because they were talking about, you need to go slow and, you don't have to fight with folks at City Hall, work with them. And we were like, no, you get the work done and we don't worry about them. So we got into it, the newspaper covered it. And they had me looking like I was Idi Amin trying to eat, Caucasians.
Yeah.
So we sat around trying to figure out how do we come back at the newspaper without attacking the black folks in the NAACP. We decided we would start our own paper. Contacted a couple of printers. The first round of the papers we put out with the New African Contender, I think we put out like 3,000 papers, and as fast as we put them down, people would pick them up. Had a bunch of writers, folks that I went to Southern Connecticut with, who volunteered writing for the paper, would come down, do stories, and we started really putting out stories. By the time we stopped working on the paper, we were putting out almost 20,000 papers down there. So I stopped when I moved to Springfield, and just started focusing on just doing community work with the Key program, DYS, stuff like that. Then recently, when the city and I severed ties, it's kind of like the media kept calling. They were right. I think they wrote about that story for about 2 weeks straight. It was just a termination. What's the big deal? The thing is, the mayor and his folks were controlling the entire narrative. So I refused to speak with the media up here. I wouldn't talk to anybody. And I finally did an interview with Tiffany Alicia for her real versus fake newscast, that little podcast that she had. I did that. Then I got with Andrew Keaton. We decided, let's get a newspaper because I want to be able to control the narrative around how I left, why I left, all the variables involved and what was taking place behind the scenes, so that people got a clear understanding. Then there were a number of other things happening with the city of Springfield and the feds coming in to regulate what was happening with the Springfield Police Department. Mass Live was only putting out certain types of information. We wanted to make sure we got all the background information.
Right.
So that's what was happening behind the start of the Metro Record. Making sure that we controlled narrative, make sure that we had our news, make sure that we can highlight events that they refuse to cover. The front page of that is the Kwanzaa, not because I'm one of the organizers, it's just that our folks need to know that things are happening. And when it gets to the point where you think nothing is happening because none of the local media outlets want to cover your events and activities and happenings, you start to get a little hopeless and despair sets in. So information and the flow of information is just super, super, super important. So.
And where can we find it?
We have 62 locations, wherever people allow us to put them. We have them in any barbershop that would allow us to place them. Small convenience stores, Tower Square, we even have them in City Hall. We have, like I said, 62 locations here. We have like 100 locations down in Connecticut because they're more open to that. We've had black business owners who refuse to let us put the newspapers in there because they're afraid we're going to just attack the mayor. It's like, no, it's bigger than the mayor. This is about information. But you can go to the website, themetrorecord.com, and we have a listing of every site, every location that will allow us to, put our papers on. And we also have the mobile, the Android and Apple app for your cell phone to go on and keep track of the news.
That's nice. So let's talk about Metro Media.
Okay. Metro Media, it's excuse me. It's the newspaper, it's the podcast that we do, it's the radio shows. I'm a personality on 90.7, personality on Spirit Life Radio, Liquid Radio down in Atlanta, Supreme Radio in Shreveport, Louisiana. So we do a lot of digital radio. 90.7 is the only terrestrial radio station, but digital radio is like extremely critical in getting information out and being able to, develop relationships with folks in different parts of the country. So there's the radio aspects, there's the newspaper, then, we have the podcast, we do the On Deck, we do Real Talk with Drew and Dee, we do Black Health Matters with Justin Yard. So in terms of really just trying to keep these shows kicking out and just really just pushing out information any way that we can, we formed an LLC around Metro Record Media so that we can do that. And we're also looking at other areas that we can expand into. We're currently in negotiation with Roku so that we can get a Roku channel so that we can just set up our own talk shows and really tap into other podcasts and other digital broadcasts that are happening so that we can get that information out in the northeastern region.
Nice.
So.
And you're also an author. Like I say, you have many different
Yeah,
avenues.
he's a man of many hats.
Well, of getting, like you said, having your voice heard, getting the information, because we know information is critical. And you talk about the newspaper, it makes me think about the news, right? When we hear things on the news, we know it's probably, a small percentage of it is fact and bias. So it's really important that we have these channels to give us our perspectives on, what's actually happening or the real facts, because a lot of times it's not. And sometimes the people in the situation, you're like, that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
even in terms of what's happening in other parts of the country, in the newspaper, we have a section on, like, my family's from Antigua, so we try and cover news from the Caribbean. We have MOUs, memorandum of understandings, with some of the newspaper outlets in Barbados, Antigua, Dominica, and a few more of the smaller islands. And then sometimes we just grab information and we share it if we feel that it needs to be done. Then when it comes down to the different African communities from, Egypt all the way down, we make sure that if there's something pressing, we'll get it in there, because you can't open up a local or regional paper around here and find out what's happening on the continent. You can't find out what's happening throughout the diaspora, whether it's dealing with Black Italians, Black Brits, Black Frenchmen. There were riots there at one point, major riots, racial riots, about 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody here knew what was even happening. So we're thinking that, when it comes down to the black community, that, America is about the worst, the worst at it. And it's not. When you look at what's happening in Venezuela, we look at Venezuela, when you look at what's happening in Brazil with the disappearance of thousands of people on a regular basis. So there are things that are happening that our folks don't know about. We get caught up in our own little, puddles, that we realize that there's a vast ocean of folks who look, walk, talk, and think just like us. So it's important that we have newspapers. It's a small one, but again, we're working with other outlets so that we can expand the information we have and even partner. Right now, Rick Hurst and I entered into an agreement where some stories we're going to make sure that we're both putting out information so that our folks get it.
Oh, that's nice.
There are some people who won't touch a Metro record because they read the point of view. They won't read the point of view because they read the Metro record. And I'm saying, read both. It's not a competition, it's information. So.
The more you know, the more you grow, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, it shouldn't be like we're all on this together.
Yeah, it's never competitive. I mean, we don't have the room to be competitive.
Correct.
When it comes down to doing things that, for the benefit or upliftment of our community. And my community is anybody that looks, walks, talks, and acts like my family. This is what it is.
Right. That's a lot. And I love how you really continue to uplift us in different ways. That has been an ongoing thing with you. Can we talk about poetry and dress? I know I'm just throwing that in there, but that's a way. Look, that's love and that's uplifting in the black community. Let's not act like it's
okay. I do write poetry. Poetry is my release. I don't even know if it's poetry. I just write. It's my release. So I do run venues. We're about to start another venue here called The Muse here in the Artist Cafe. It's only natural and fitting that we do something like that. So it's an open mic for poets, singers, actors, painters, musicians. We're going to make sure that people have a platform where they can creatively express themselves. So there's that. Then there's Poetry and Dress. It's probably the longest running venue that I have. And Poetry and Dress revolves around love. I don't think there's anything more important, more revolutionary than love. When I first started spitting poetry, everything was all about revolutionary, pro-black, blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of like, well, you can spit on that, but if you don't love who you are, and you don't love your significant other, and you don't love your family members, then you're really not about that life. You really gotta learn to love. So I kind of shifted my style of poetry up. Most of my poems revolve around black women. So that's it. So we decided to create Poetry Address. Poetry Address is that stage. It's like the only poetry stage in New England. There's nothing like it in Boston. There's nothing like that in Bridgeport, New Haven. There just isn't, where you can get on stage and you can really just espouse your love for black people, for black women. It's romantic. A lot of it is erotic, because intimacy is part of our relationship. So it just is what it is, and that's the part that makes me laugh. And people go, so you all about the community, but you up here talking about sex. Well,
it's part of love.
I was born
Right.
because of it, you know what I mean? I wasn't born in a tube. It happens. So it's all about presenting it in a way that's positive and affirming, and we don't have to be embarrassed about who we are, what we are, and how we get down.
So how important is it to have that outlet for the poets that do perform? Like, how important is it for them to have that safe space to be able to express themselves?
It's very, very, very important. And how do I know? Because every time we have Poetry Undressed, the room is jam-packed, which means it's not even just important for the poets, it's important for the people in the audience to say, yo, that was wild what you just said. That's how I feel. You know, for people to come and identify with it. And every time we produce one of those events, the place is packed, the poets love it, the singers love it, we have a live band, they love it. It's just a vibe. And again, more importantly, the people who support it and keep it going, they love it and they appreciate the information. Poets come with books, CDs, the slaps, little bracelet, USBs, and people buy them. So it's a consumer audience, and consumers, real consumers don't support anything that they don't really vibe with.
Right.
So.
You're also the founder of the Springfield, make sure I say it correctly, Indie Soul Festival.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that for those who don't know?
Yeah. I forgot about that. All right. So we started the Springfield Indie Soul Festival 15. This will be our 15th year here, August of 2023. And we started that again because, you know, we had Stone Soul, which is really dope. It's family oriented. They have some great things happening. We have the West Indian Carnival Association, the Caribbean Carnival Association, Carnival. But I like independent music. So I dig music that has a pro-conscious message behind it. So, and that, you know, the Eric Robersons, the, oh my gosh, the Indombies, those folks, Toby and Wigwam would now fit in that, you know, in that genre of indie music where it's just fire and it's really about loving them. The music is all about loving yourself. So we decided to create a venue around it, and it was the Indie Soul Festival. It's our 15th year. We bring up artists from all over the country. We also provide a stage for a few of the local performers, but I deal primarily with national indie artists because they take it much, much more serious. When you bring local performers on stage, on that type of stage, they treat it like it's an open mic. And they got to understand that even though it's in your backyard, you still have to be professional. So we really look for artists from across the country. I don't care if they come from Chicago. We've had them from the Caribbean. We've had African acts. We had 2 acts that came up from Nigeria. So we get them from all over the place and we bring them up. And, you know, it's not heavily attended. We don't have thousands of people, but there's enough people
Not yet.
where it's like we have a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
the
see
things
it going to thousands. I'm sorry.
You see it going there?
I do.
Good.
You just gotta keep at it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
all the things that you mentioned, it seems like networking is very important to be successful in all the things that you're doing. Staying in communication with different people from different parts of the, not even just the city, the world.
Yeah.
And you know, as we grow our business, this is something that we're learning to do too, is to network, to make ourselves more involved in community and understanding what's happening in our own. We're learning a lot through this process. We're learning so much about our community just from interviewing people like yourself. You've been a source of knowledge for us, right? Providing us different resources. We're asking you questions on how we can do certain things. Like, I know this person, that person, this person. So can you talk about how important it is to network and why that is at the core of kind of everything that you're doing?
You know, networking is probably the most important thing that anybody can do if you're starting any type of business or any type of initiative. It's critical. And the key piece about networking is you never look down on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most important piece. Some people, you know, you get a few hand claps if you're a performer and you think you're bigger than the people who are coming up. If you're involved in politics, you work with a major politician or you run for office and, you know, you become an elected official and you start looking at everybody else as if they're less than. If you're that socialite and, you know, everybody knows you when you walk into a club, you treat other folks like they don't exist. That's like the worst thing you can do, no matter who you are, no matter what your occupation is. From religious institutions to politics to entertainment, man, you got to treat people like they're people.
Mm-hmm.
People remember that. So it's kind of like when you're willing to share your resources and not ask for anything in return, people remember that. So 5-10 years later, when you make that phone call and you go, hey, Chris, I need a favor, people don't mind helping out.
Right.
You know, the other piece with building relationships is, again, being willing to help people get their stuff started. And again, not want anything in return. Stepping out of your comfort zone, going to events, activities, happenings, things that you identify with, places. If you see yourself in a certain position, you got to go around folks who are in that position so you learn more about it. The other piece is, in order to get anything off the ground, man, you have to keep it as real as possible with folks on the ground level, people in the neighborhood. You have to build your following, your body of work on your way up is far more important than when you reach your destination. So in that sense, it's really about the journey and the people you stop to talk to, from a guy who's hooked on crack that you might run into down the corner. You don't know who that person's going to be in 5 years. So it's like just treating people like human beings. I think that's the most important relationship. Going, you know, how can I say this? I've gone places where, you know, 5 people in the audience, and sometimes it's some of the best shows or the best lecture sessions I've ever had. Not because of the content of whoever's performing or speaking. Man, I meet somebody in that audience with 3 or 4 people, and it's like, wow, you're who? You do what? You know, and it's like you look at the people and they're dressed down, you have no idea. It's like you can treat them like, you know, they just wear bummy sneakers and jeans. I also found out, you know, in terms of relationship building, man, never judge a book by its cover. Because the cats that have the vast amounts of resources, yo, man, they come in and, you know, they don't care. The sneakers be dirty, jeans be busted, hat is all like they've been wearing it for 20 years. But then when you start talking to them, and you realize it's like, yo, this person is dope. Yo, you worked with who? Yeah, I worked with such and such. And you're just like, oh my God. Around here, a person like that I would say is James Lewis. James is just, what you see is what you get. And people sleep on him until they realize you can't do anything in entertainment anywhere without mentioning his name. We were in Philly, we went to the Five Spot, and I'm talking to people, and they're like, oh, it's Springfield. Ooh, here. I'm like, damn, that's James. That's my man. We did shows together. They're like, yo, this dude helped me get my career started. So it's like, you don't sleep on anybody.
Right.
Everybody becomes an ally because you just don't know who you're going to meet. So relationships, networking is so important. And networking isn't just going to, semi-professional or professional events. Networking is, again, just really trying to connect with people everywhere you go, no matter who they are or what they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It does.
it's,
All the sense.
yeah, it's kind of like, being the mayor of your town, like just being involved, not literally, but you know what I'm saying? Like
I know what you're saying.
just being connected and not taking anyone for granted.
Right.
So, but looking back, if you look back at your career, and all the things you've accomplished, throughout the years, all the different people's lives you might have touched, what's something that you hold near and dear to your heart that was the most impactful for you? I know it's probably a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if it's any one thing.
Yeah.
What's your top three?
I don't know. My top three are my kids. It's like, but in terms of like the things you do socially, it's like it's a part of what you do. So it's kind of, I don't know. I've never really stopped to gauge what I've done. What I would, if I went to my grave tomorrow, would I go to my grave saying, wow, these are the three best things that have ever happened to me? I have no idea. I just feel like my life is just one long, non-stop journey. For me, it's an epic novel because there's always something happening. And you can't sit back and revel on what I did last year because there's still so much that has to be done this year. Mm-hmm. So I'm keeping it 100. I wish there were, things I could look at. I wish I could answer that question, but I'd be lying if I came up with three things. I could say my biggest regret was meeting Ralph Abernathy and Bobby Seale. And I was just so disrespectful. Ralph Abernathy, who marched with King and everything, but this is when I was at college. This is my biggest regrets. I'll go to my grave regretting that. It's like, by the time we hit college, we were on our, Pan-Africanism and everything. And these are cats who were saying, you have to work with the structure. We were saying integration failed. He was saying integration worked. And we were really disrespectful with it. Not like calling him out of his name, but just like really not valuing the information that he had to share. Same thing with Bobby Seale. He came to Southern Connecticut talking about barbecue sauce. We don't want to hear about barbecue sauce. We're trying to figure out how to change the world, but you don't realize when somebody's involved in this life for 20, 30 years, they give their whole entire life, they have a right to kick back and just enjoy their lives and not get involved in anything. So those are like my two biggest regrets. The fact that I didn't take them seriously and not understanding just how critically important they were to our collective social progress.
Acknowledging that means a lot, though.
Yeah. Something you learn from. So up and coming things, you talked about keeping, going and looking forward. And so what are some things that you're working on for this year and the next few years coming up?
Okay. Quite as is Kev, working with the Black Leadership Alliance here in Springfield. We're trying to organize all the different organizations, political entities, and bringing everybody to the table. We're getting really close. We have political folks who just haven't talked or connected in years, sitting down at the table and working with each other behind the scenes. We founded the Association of Black Business Professionals about 6 years ago, and that's picking up, it's moving. We have Anthony Moore and Kareem Cambodia with BECMA, which is a critical piece in our community. And just bringing those folks to the table, having them work together along with other economic development organizations that are, that are coming into fruition, things that are happening now, organizations that are being organized, structured, and put in place, make sure these folks are all working together. So for me, I think the biggest thing is just really bringing everybody together. Also looking at, influencers that some of the noted personalities have no idea exist. When I look at the work that you guys are doing, that plays a role when we start talking about media and media outlets. organizations, including the podcast. Folks who send out just small newsletters, come to find out they ain't small. They got like 10,000 people on their email list. So bringing all those people together so that we can actually form a collective. Towards the end of February, we're going to have the State of Black Springfield Address, in which we'll have all these entities coming together at the Ray Jordan Center to really talk about where we are, instead of people making sweeping generalizations about our community. We can actually compile the data and give people firm information so that we can't say, well, all black men are in jail. That's the furthest thing for the truth. Here's the data. We've done the work. And for any information that folks need to get out so that we can move forward, whether it's small business development, what are the real numbers? Are all our businesses failing, or do we have people just doing business, handling their business in ways which folks just don't know?
Right.
So our job is to really organize all that. I think for me, that's like a major piece of what I plan to do for like the next 2 to 5 years. The other piece is getting folks out of Springfield, out of that small Springfield political mindset, and thinking about Eastern Mass, and really working with political organizations up in the Boston area, because that's where all the resources are. Imagine if you can get enough legislators on board, and you guys get, say, $400,000 or $500,000 earmark from the state legislature to really kick off what you're doing. How would that benefit your business? We don't have access to those resources because we're not organized as a collective. We also have very few advocates and lobbyists going down to Boston. We send black and brown elected officials down there, and everybody advocates for everybody except for our community. And the only way we can get them to change that narrative is if we organize and we start holding folks accountable. So I think for me, that's going to be huge. The other pieces, I'm working with Dave here with the cafe, and I just really dig the spot. We need an urban vibe, so really can put a lot of time and energy into furthering the development of the cafe. Dave does the operations, I do all the creative content. Callie Green does the art. So we're like, if we can keep it going, keep it growing, we'll have something.
You have something.
Huh?
I said you already have something. It's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I like to tear down that wall, tear down one of these walls and expand
And
it.
expand,
But,
so you want to add to that something.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are like two of the biggest things for me.
I have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, we appreciate, all that you're doing for the community, for us, and we continue to support you and want to see great things continue to go in your way in the future. And we appreciate your time today with us and the resources and the knowledge that you shared with us as well. So thank you for spending your time with us today.
Any last remarks? No?
Support the show. Support what they're doing. That's it.
All right, give me a hug, because you know I love you.
No, you
And
can't.
come on. Thank you again. Yes, stop. Thank you.
Well, you can't leave me out. No, thank you so
It's
much.
a family thing.
Yeah.
Cameraman, you want a hug?
Definitely not.